welcome back everyone. And first up, I want to apologize. There was no news roundup last week, and I actually only managed to get one video up. This week, I was sick. That's all there is to it. No real excuse. I should have a bigger backlog than I do. I actually have a couple of videos waiting to edit, but I was just wiped out and then busy at work this week. So unfortunately, this should have been recorded in front of that fancy new green screen. I think you've seen a sum total of twice actually. I think I've recorded in front of it twice. So that's where we are with this. Now, I don't know why today I can't seem to quite get the camera at an angle that I like in here. Potentially because I can't find the tripod I want to use. I think I took it to work and left it there. So I apologize that the angles and lighting is a little bit off from what I want. In fact, let me fix that. That actually makes that a ton better, although there's still some glare on my glasses that I don't want there to be. So Pocketables news. I mentioned I have a Byte 4 running with 16 gigs of RAM. I think I asked this last week. I mentioned that I'm still waiting to get some validation of part numbers from Mushkin, who helped sponsor that. And in the meantime, I've run some performance details on it, and I want to show why you would bother putting that much memory in a system that originally shipped with 4. So I've got plenty of normal stuff that I can do with it. Using it as a phone system, using it as a camera server, using it as a storage server. All of those are real straightforward, and honestly, I don't think any of those are going to stress it. Camera server could, depending on how many you use and what software you use. Will be running a demo with that using Blue Iris, which is my typical solution for cameras. However, other stuff is available. There's the iSpy software. ZoneMinder is a popular one, and I'm just not as familiar with those as I am with Blue Iris. Could also put it up as a public Minecraft server. That's been thought that's been bounced around. So, let me know in the comments. Maybe I can make it do a couple of those at once. It's got enough memory that Hyper-V is a great option to make it do a couple of different things, especially with that Windows 10 Pro license it ships with. So let me know in the comments below what you want to see there. Moving on to our first actual news item in the everywhere this week. I was incorrect. Windows 11 is legitimate. Now, we got our eyes on a very early version of it, but Microsoft made the announcement official this week. And it's not just some theme that somebody slapped on a Windows 10 ISO to make some fuss. Now, this comes with the downside of a lot of people are upset about some of the system requirements that have been announced by Microsoft that Windows 11 will require. And also their upgrade tool kind of sucks. It tells me that my organization manages all of my systems, so I'll have to ask my administrator, if my system qualifies, which I think one does and one doesn't. There's a couple of requirements people have been confused about. Some people are thinking, oh my god, it needs NVMe SSDs. There are components that require an NVMe SSD. The OS itself doesn't. That pertains to the DirectX 12 Ultimate direct storage function that also requires newer graphics cards so that they can directly access textures stored on the drive. And when I say newer, I mean RTX 2000 and higher from NVIDIA, and I think 6000 series from AMD. Maybe some of the Vega cards, I'm not 100% sure on those. So there's been that. There's been people up in arms about why do I suddenly need a TPM. Honestly, you should be upset at your manufacturer for not including a TPM. It's not an expensive piece of hardware. It is an excellent security tool to have. Intel and AMD have started integrating it into the firmware of some of their newest CPUs. But quite frankly, if you have a system that came without a TPM, it's not Microsoft's fault that you didn't get one. They tried to require it for Windows 8.1. It is at the hands of Dell, Lenovo, HP, Chewy, whatever vendor sold you the system that, where's the TPM? Well, we cheaped out. I think that Microsoft may loosen that restriction. I've already seen them backpedal a little bit, saying you don't need TPM 2, that's the one that we want, but you do need at least TPM 1.2, which is an older spec, and many more systems will meet that requirement. As for why, the short answer is it's a security tool that you should have had once it was available in the first place. The long answer is I could do a whole video on it, and we're not going to get into that today. So, moving on, Oppo has announced, or has made known, that OnePlus is going to be relegated to a sub-brand, which kind of sucks. OnePlus was one of the few independent brands that really did go toe-to-toe with Samsung for the past couple of generations, and with LG having exited the smartphone market officially, at least here in the US, we don't have a ton of great competition. You've got 5 vendors that you can usually count on seeing an Android phone from at a carrier here in the US, and those are Samsung, LG, OnePlus, Motorola, and Google's Pixel devices. And of those, there's not really a whole ton of variety or great choices. The Motorola's are all lower-end devices. Typically, the OnePlus devices are a flagship. The Google devices really only appeal to those of you who really enjoy the Google ecosystem, and that just leaves OnePlus and LG. Well, LG's leaving the market, and OnePlus is being, I guess, reabsorbed into Oppo. So we'll see if that impacts their availability here in the US or not. Frankly, it's kind of disappointing to see so little competition when I know there are many excellent devices that I just can't get. Devices from Sony, devices from Sharp, devices from a number of other manufacturers that just aren't really available when I go to Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile and say, hey, I need a new phone. Because that's sadly typically how we buy our phones here in the US. One more piece of Pocketables news. This week's video was something that I'm hoping to do more segments on. I think I mentioned it last news roundup, and this week's was not a review, not a teardown, not an unboxing. It was a how-to, and this round was how to clean out a USB-C port, because my OnePlus 7 Pro 5G is, well, in my pants pocket most of the time, and tends to collect lint in the USB port. So go ahead and check that out if your phone's having charging issues. It's definitely an easy and cheap first step. I did add a couple of kits that were available on Amazon under the $10 mark that really had a variety of tools to help you clean out a phone port as well. I think some included cleaning wipes for the cameras and things of that nature. So definitely worth your while to check out if you are having charging issues or are just curious about how to do it. And we're going to continue to add new segments like that as we go on for a variety of things. I'm hoping to make it a weekly feature. I say that as I was sick and was only able to get one video out this week. But in addition to the 2 videos a week that I typically aim for to have an unboxing or review or teardown, I would also like to have some sort of useful piece of tech advice at least once a week. And if there are questions or things that you're curious about, leave those in the comments below, because that will help make sure that I'm answering the questions that you guys have. I can do the bog standard things everybody's done. How do I make a Windows install drive which this might be a good time with it, with 11 around the corner. How do I image a drive? How do I install Windows? All of those type of things are, low-hanging fruit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the things that you guys want to hear. So let me know in the comments, and I will make sure to include those as I go through and make some of those how-to or tech tip videos. One piece of news this week that I have been waiting to hear that is a bit off the beaten path for Pocketables, but is definitely important to me professionally, is that Rocky Linux 8.4 was announced this week. Now, for a little bit of background there, IBM purchased Red Hat, which is an enterprise Linux distribution that was used by many projects, some of which I rely on one of its derivatives, CentOS, for at work. Now, Red Hat and CentOS, the relationship was fairly typical for historical relationships in enterprise Linux builds, where you pay for support and you get Red Hat if you need it, or if it's just a community project or you're tinkering with something, there is CentOS, which is available for free. Now, I used CentOS because we did not have a sufficient quantity of licenses at work to require us to go license Red Hat Enterprise Linux for things like our phone system, which came available as a pre-packaged ISO from Sangoma, where it installed CentOS, and then it installs Asterisk and the PBX software, and you can configure it on top of that. With IBM's purchase, this past December came new licensing terms that basically made CentOS entirely unappealing for anyone who is continuing to use it. They killed all of its support. They dramatically reduced how many instances of it people were allowed to use, and overall just made it an unappealing prospect, especially alongside you'd now be licensing Red Hat with support from IBM, should you need to do so. And a lot of the CentOS team left, and there was a new project called Rocky Linux. Well, that reached its first release this week and is available to poke and prod at. Now, we're 6 months after IBM's announcement. This may be too little too late for a lot of projects. And that's not a dig at the Rocky Linux team. I think they're doing the best that they can, and it's certainly something that I will give a try, and it really does just look like they've done as much as they could to save CentOS under a new name. I'm sure there's some stuff they had to take out to keep the licensing people at IBM happy, but there's other Linux distributions that are known for their reliability that will have stepped in to fill the void. Another big one that I use a ton of at work is the Debian server builds, and you can go very quickly and easily spin up Debian with just a LAMP stack or a WordPress instance or a wiki instance. There's communities that literally have the latest version of Debian. It's not Jesse or Buster, I think it's Stretch, available with those tools already on it. And I'll put a link to that in the description below if I remember to do so. So I'm happy to see Rocky Linux is here, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens because my PBX is running CentOS. Well, CentOS is dead, basically. I'm kind of curious to see if Sangoma jumps ship to Debian or continues to stick with Rocky Linux for the Red Hat derived distros. Another piece of news this week. I don't know if anyone here uses Zyxel networking gear. It's not really a favorite of mine. Big shock, my favorite generally is MikroTik. I mean, I've got, well, MikroTik and TrendNet. We've got plenty of TrendNet stuff in for review, but a lot of the stuff that I purchased personally is MikroTik, and I've got some of it, you know, here's my 3011 that we took apart the other day, and I've got, the HAP AC and the RB260GS in here and other things like that are just very unique and functional, and I love the way MikroTik licenses Router OS compared to some of the other ones. But back to the actual news item, Zyxel, who I don't really have a ton of experience with one way or the other, there was a very large security leak. There'll be a link to an article from Ars Technica regarding that. Basically, if you have a Zyxel device, update it today. And I think our last item, we'll keep this a relatively short news update since I'm still not feeling super great, is another security item, and that is going to be, if you have a Western Digital Mybook that is attached to the internet, go unplug it. There are people losing their data right now because of a security flaw in the Western Digital Mybooks as far as their cloud functionality is concerned. And this is leading to people losing large amounts of personal data. I personally was always kind of wary of those, and it's not that I don't necessarily like the idea of personal hosted cloud connected storage. Conceptually, I love it. However, Western Digital was always a new player and a small player in that compared to companies like QNAP or Synology, who built NAS systems, did network stuff, and just generally were much deeper in that market than Western Digital was. And WD always did their best to make things consumer friendly, but that is counterbalanced with the easier you make it to use, the more you obfuscate from the user, and the harder it is to actually secure. And I could go on for an hour about the balance of data accessibility versus data security, and how the more dumbed down you make it, the more likely you are to lose it. But that's besides the point. Everybody ends up making mistakes. Well, WD's mistakes are costing people data, so if you have a WD Mybook device that is network capable and is connected to an internet accessible, it is in your best interest to disconnect it from the internet until such a time when there is a new firmware available for it that resolves the current issue. That all said, as always, I would like to thank everyone who helps support Pocketables, either by using our Amazon affiliate links, subscribing to us on Patreon, or here on YouTube. It is support like that that helps make videos like this possible. I would like to thank Electrix for providing our opening and closing themes. And finally, thank you for watching.